You are like a puppy. And this is why it's so hard to accept the truth. And you want to know something crazy? So right before I came up here to talk to you about habits, honest to goodness, you know what I was doing? I was standing in my kitchen with my family of 5, and we were in the middle of a dog training session. I'm not making this up. We have a 3-year-old Australian Shepherd named Yolo and a 5-month-old puppy named Homie. And Homie needs new habits. Homie is not going to go from being a puppy to a beautifully trained dog without us training him. You are the same way as Homie. Right now, there are areas of your life where you're doing whatever the hell you want to do, just like my puppy is. And you and I are going to go back to obedience school, back to the basics. That's what habits are about. And as I was sitting there watching this training session with our 2 dogs, I'm thinking, holy smokes, it really is this simple. So I had this epiphany, and I just turned to Caroline Edgar from Grateful Dogs, and I said, would you be willing to come upstairs with me? Because I'm about to do something about habits, and you training these dogs is making me realize everything I was about to say to the humans is the exact same thing that you do to the dogs. And so she came up here. So here I am talking with Caroline. So I am so blown away right now that I kidnapped Caroline from our family dog training session. And she's like, wait, what? You're going to put me on the podcast? You could have given me some warning, Mel. I'm just so blown away by how training dogs, or at least how you train new behaviors in dogs, is the exact same steps, sequence, and science in how human beings learn new habits and behaviors.
Right. I often have people say, can I train my husband this way? And I'm like, yeah, you actually can.
With a clicker?
Right? Positive reinforcement. Just reinforce what you like.
There it is right there. Reinforce what you like. Learning new habits is dead simple. And let's just stay on this puppy analogy for a minute before we jump into all the big science, right? How do you make it a habit for a puppy to sit? I mean, it doesn't just automatically sit. You have to train the puppy to do a new pattern. So let's stop and think about this, because it's the exact same way you train yourself to do any new habit. First of all, you have to identify the thing that you want to do. And for me, with our puppy Homie, when I say the word sit, I want him to put his butt on the ground. The second thing that you need to do is identify a treat. What's your milk bone? Because that dog is not going to sit on the ground unless I reward him for doing what I want him to do. And finally, you got to think about what is the command or the physical thing that you're going to do that will trigger this positive new behavior pattern. That's it. That's how you teach a dog to sit. You come up with the command, which is basically a trigger or a cue that is signaling, okay, time to put your butt on the ground. That's the behavior pattern. And then you give them a milk bone, a reward. And the more that you repeat this and the more you reward the dog for doing what you want it to do, guess what? The faster it becomes a habit. I am really serious about this. Because remember, I said there are 2 things that are getting in the way of you taking this very well-documented research that you need to cue the new behavior, you need to do the new behavior, then you need to reward the new behavior. And the thing that's getting in your way of just doing this is that you got a lot of emotions and opinions about the things you need to do. And so you think it's complicated to work on your business, and so you don't do it. Or you're like, I don't feel like going to the gym. It's not that complicated. It's actually simple. It's like training a puppy. Thank God our puppy Homie can't talk, because I'm sure if he could, he'd be like you and I are, but I don't feel like sitting down right now, but I don't want to. No, let's make this as simple as training a puppy. And I'm doing this not because this is kind of funny, ha ha ha. I'm doing this because this is actually what the research says. The research is as plain as day. You need 3 things. You need to cue the new behavior, you need the behavior pattern that you want to repeat, and you need to reward the behavior. That's it. That's what Dr. Wendy Wood says, and this is what every book on the planet is teaching you, and this is what the science says. There is a 3-step process, and this 3-step process is critical. And so on the episode today, we are going to go step by step by step through all 3 steps until you get this. You get this in your being, because these 3 steps are how you go from a life of hitting the snooze alarm 4 times to a life where you have a rock solid morning routine. You have to think about the new behavior, how you're going to trigger that, and what the reward is going to be. That's it. That's it. So let's start with part 1. That is the cue. You'll also hear this called the trigger. You'll hear this called the signal, the command. Whatever you want to call it is fine with me. This is just the thing that is signaling that it is time to do the new behavior. And I'm going to stick with the example of the puppy because I really want you to get that this is all there is to habits. We can layer on all the emotion and all the opinions about it, but it boils down to these 3 things. So part 1, if I want to teach the puppy this new behavior of learning how to sit, the cue is very simple. You say the word sit. Another thing that I could do is I could raise my hand in the air silently. Simple, right? That's how you teach a dog to sit. You got to cue the behavior. Otherwise, it doesn't know that it wants me to do it. Simple. Same with you. You got to trigger any new habit. Part number 2, the new behavior. So the new behavior is literally, I want our dog to make it a habit to put his rear end on the floor when I either raise my fist or I say sit. That's it. And so I can do that one of 2 ways. I can either take a treat and lift it up towards its nose in the sky, and then as he lifts his nose up, his rear end will naturally sit down. Or as I say the word sit, I can gently help him put his rear end on the floor. There's part 2, the behavior pattern. Part 3, and this is essential because this is what makes the behavior automatic. This is the part that locks it into your brain and encodes it. You have to treat the behavior immediately. Immediately. Now, for a dog, what I learned downstairs in the kitchen this morning is that you have to do it within seconds. Literally within seconds. With you and me, we're going to dig into this more deeply when we really unpack rewards, is you and I, based on the research, we have to reward ourselves within 2 minutes of finishing the new behavior. And the treat really, really matters because what's happening when you do this is you're associating in the brain the cue or the word sit with a milk bone. That's what's happening. This is going to become a habit in my dog to sit when he hears the word sit, not because he hears the word sit, but because the second he hears it, he starts thinking about the reward. That's why this works. That's how this encodes in the brain. The reward is critical. And here's what we do as human beings. We get so emotional about this stuff that we focus on the thing we're supposed to do. Why can't I just journal? Why can't I stop eating bread? Why is it that I always put myself last? Why can't I just be consistent with this thing? And you're missing the 2 most important parts. It's not about the journaling, everybody. It's about getting smart about this 3-part system. How you're going to trigger the positive behavior of journaling every single morning. And what reward are you going to give yourself within 2 minutes of finishing it? What's your milk bone? This is why habits matter. Because you and I are busy setting goals and wanting to change behavior, but we're only focusing on behavior and we're not thinking about the science. See, you're not dumb, you're not stupid, you're not any less capable. You just need to simplify this and really focus on how you cue new behavior in yourself. And more importantly, how are you going to reward this? I promised you that I am going to make this habit research as simple and as effortless as a cup of coffee so that you don't think about it, so that you just sit down and you journal. Because guess what? You're the kind of person that does that because it's a habit. Now what I want to do is drill down even more on the cue, how you're going to trigger behavior, and the reward. And let's focus on what this means for human beings, okay? And so let's start with the cue or what a lot of researchers call the trigger for new behavior. Anytime you hear somebody talk about a trigger, whether it's habit research or trauma or whatever, a trigger is something that signals to your brain that it's time for you to engage in this pattern of behavior. And honestly, there's already a lot of behavior in your life that is being triggered and you don't even realize it. If you're the kind of person, for example, that makes a cup of coffee every morning without even thinking about it, the morning is triggering a cup of coffee. The morning is triggering this habit of making a cup of coffee. If you're like I used to be, it's 6 o'clock, time to have a glass of wine. 6 o'clock is triggering a cup of coffee. And when you think about your own behavior change, there are 6 types of triggers that are right now triggering behavior in you and that you can think about using proactively when you identify the new habits that you want to create. So the first trigger is sound. Now, obviously, I just talked about this with YOLO and Homie, but the word sit, boom, that can trigger the action of sitting on the ground. A whistle can trigger the action of a dog coming to you. But it's also true for you. You know that sound that you hear when you turn on Netflix? Dun, 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 right? And it makes you go like, ooh, okay, and you settle in. That's a sound trigger. They're literally creating an association with that sound with a positive feeling of sitting on that couch for a couple hours and zoning out. You're ready for TV. Time of day. I've already talked about this. Time of day is a humongous trigger. So the morning triggers you to do a certain number of things. The evening triggers you to do things like have a glass of wine or start making dinner. A third trigger for behavior is location. Location, location, location. You know, it's very easy to stick to your habits when you're in your own home because your home, where you live, it triggers a certain routine. When you go visit somebody, when you go to your parents' house, when you're off on vacation, isn't it interesting that within 3 or 4 days, you just feel off? Your routine is off. You're itching to get back home. Well, the reason why is because that location that you're now in is different than the location that triggers your old routine. You don't feel like exercising because you're at your mother's house. And another thing is like, you know, sometimes you can be at your house and it's almost like it's like sucks you in and you don't feel motivated to work on your book or to do whatever, or to jump on an online class. But boy, you feel different when you walk into a different location, don't you? Like a gym. Another trigger is an emotional state. A lot of you are writing to me about how you have goals of becoming a healthier eater this year. And you're probably aware that your emotions of sadness or boredom or feeling tired, that emotion is triggering you to make you reach for something. You know, when I'm frustrated, for example, that emotion, it triggers a habit I don't like, which is snapping at my kids. And I also learned today in the dog training class, check this out. This is true for dogs too. There's a difference between the skills you're learning and the emotional state you're trying to master. And believe it or not, your pets have emotional states that interfere with their ability to access the skills that they're learning. So just like you get emotional and the wheels go off, the same thing happens with your pets. That's why even though I'm trying to train my dog YOLO to be quiet when people arrive, that's a new habit we're working on. When he gets like really overwhelmed, he just starts barking. And so your emotions are huge triggers. Right now, they're huge triggers probably for bad habits, but we can start to use that trigger of emotion to develop new habits. And finally, the fifth one is other people that you're around. I know that you know that your circle matters, but I want you to just think about how much this matters. Let's say you are somebody that wants to exercise every single day. That's a huge thing for people, right? Or I even got a better one. Let's say that you're somebody who really wants to make it a habit to be more organized this year. Tell me, does a person who is living with roommates who are complete and utter slobs, we're talking days of dishes in the sink, coats strewn all over the main area of the apartment. Their stuff is everywhere. The bathroom's disgusting. Now think about a person that lives with roommates who are OCD clean, Who do you think is going to have an easier time making a habit of staying organized? That's right, the person that's surrounded by people who support that change. And the final trigger are things in your environment. So, for example, I love Post-it notes because Post-it notes can be a trigger for a positive habit. And I can give you an example. Mr. Noodle, our cat, when he gets upset or angry or gets locked out of his room, he likes to go into this bathroom upstairs and pee in the corner. It's disgusting, I know. But he's mad at me. So he has this bad habit of doing this and acting out. When the door is closed, he can't do it. Nobody's going to remember to close the door. So I put a little trigger in the environment, a Post-it note that says, keep the door closed, because I'm trying to signal a new habit in everybody around here in closing the door. Now, I love triggers and I love focusing on triggers because triggers and thinking about how do I cue this behavior? How do I make it easier for myself? How do I make the thing that I'm supposed to do obvious, like that Post-it note that says close the door? When you focus on triggers, you can now hack habits. And this is such an enormous topic with so many tools and takeaways that we're going to dedicate the next episode in this series to the science of hacking habits and using triggers to make habits easier and obvious, okay? And there's a lot of this in that free worksheet, melrobbins.com/habits, that will help you figure out triggers, both positive and negative. But the bottom line is no trigger, no habit. No cue, no habit. And by the way, triggers are why bad habits are so hard to break. And here's why. Let's say that, like me, maybe you're participating in a month of not drinking, okay? We can't get rid of 6 p.m. at night. If you have a habit of pouring a glass of wine every night at 6 p.m., 6 p.m. ain't going away. And so you need to know that when 6 p.m. rolls around, when that sun goes down, when that clock strikes 6, guess what's going to happen? You are going to be triggered to repeat your old habit. Because what does a habit have? It has a trigger, it has a behavior, drink that glass of wine, and then it has a reward. Ah, that feels good. You can't get rid of 6 p.m., which is why when it comes to replacing behavior, you have to anticipate the trigger and replace the behavior. Here's another one. When somebody starts cooking dinner, don't you feel hungry? Or when somebody starts making a snack in the kitchen, don't you feel like you want a snack? Me too. We cannot take away the things that trigger our current habits. You're never going to get over the fact that an alarm's going to go off in the morning. New habits allow you to change your response to existing triggers. That's where this gets exciting. And the other thing that's exciting about triggers and why we're going to dedicate the entire next episode around it is because when you get proactive about creating triggers, Post-it notes, visual cues, surrounding yourself with the right people, now you're using triggers to your advantage. I got a trigger. I'm about to tell you, we're going to take a quick break for our sponsors. I bet there's something you do automatically. Don't skip the ads. Let's have a new behavior. They're supporting the show because we're going to be right back. And when we return, I got a great reward for you. We're going to jump deep into that third part of all behavior change, and that is the reward and how you use it and what researchers say about it so that you lock in these new habits. Welcome back. I'm so glad you're here with me. We just talked about the 3 parts of a habit, which are the cue or trigger, the behavior you need to repeat, and the reward. And as promised, now we're going to go deep into this third essential part, and that is the reward. You have to have a reward. The research is so clear on this, and this goes not only for human beings, but also for puppies. Here's what our trainer from Grateful Heart had to say about the importance of a reward. So, Caroline, is it possible to teach a dog a new behavior without a reward?
No. There's got to be a reward of some kind. So it doesn't need to be food. It could be personal play. It could be, it can even be the environment. It could even be something as much as if they check in with me, you can say, free, you're off leash, run through the field, have fun, Environmental rewards, go sniff. Often I use that with my dogs. Like they come in and they check in with me and I'm like, yeah, go get it.
This is essential. Let's just take the puppy. When you repeat the command, right? So you've got this trigger, down, which means lie down. And your dog does it, and then you hand them a milk bone, you are fusing the command, the trigger, down with the reward. And that's how the behavior becomes automatic. That's it. Now look, for you, I don't want you eating a milk bone. That's not the reward. And for some habits, it's easier to lock them in place because there's an innate reward. So for example, brushing your teeth. That's a very easy habit to get into. Why? Because the reward is that your mouth doesn't feel like it's got shag carpeting on it anymore. Or using dryer sheets. Why is that easy to kind of remember to do? Well, because it's a really nice reward when you pull things out of the dryer and you don't get an electric shock. Or when you buy things. This is why some bad habits are very easy to learn. When you buy something, the reward is both the thrill of the purchase, and if you bought it online, you get a second reward because the new thing arrives at your door. This also explains why coffee, alcohol, things that we kind of get addicted to, they're pretty potent habits, aren't they? Because the reward is the second that you sip it, you feel good. The reward is innate. But for other habits, you have to add an external reward, okay? Because the reward is what gives you a bit of dopamine. When my puppy gets the milk bone, or it gets a pat on the head, or it gets a little tug of war play, it gets a reward of dopamine. That motivation and drive chemical is what locks in the behavior as automatic. It creates what researchers call a habit loop. So when you text a friend a photo after you finish something and they text you back, boom, dopamine. That's why you make it a habit to text your friends, because it feels good when they text back. When you have a little piece of chocolate, I have one every day right around 2 o'clock. It's a little bit of a habit. I feel the 2 o'clock strike. Boom. Where's my chocolate? Boom. The dopamine hits. That's my reward. It's a habit. When you watch a funny video, why do we waste so much time watching funny memes and TikToks? Because every time that you laugh, dopamine, you get a reward. That's why you keep strolling, by the way, because you might just get another reward. You keep seeking out the behavior. This is why the reward is so important. And most of us are just kind of hoping we feel better. You need to hack behavior change by thinking about what is your milk bone going to be? And let me use a very common habit that people want to lock into place to explain this: exercising more. So for some of you, maybe this is you, simply the thrill of the post-workout endorphin, it's enough of a reward. Not for me. I'm going to tell you a story about me trying to create a habit of exercising 5 days a week and why the reward was the only reason why it happened. Okay. So this was in 2019. I was a brand new TV talk show host, and I was living during the week in a hotel in New York City as we were taping this show. And it was really important to me, because this job was super stressful, that I figured out how to get exercise in every single day. Now, here's the rub. The job of being a TV host required me to be at the CBS Broadcast Center by 7 o'clock in the morning. And most nights I worked until at least 7 o'clock at night. So I knew that I was not going to have the energy to exercise at night. And I also knew that if I was going to actually make it to that studio by 7 o'clock every morning, ready to go, ready to work, ready to tape a TV show, I had to be exercising by 5:30 in the morning. I don't know about you, but I am not the kind of person that loves to just spring right out of bed. I am not like my husband. I do not roll right out of bed. And so the thought of getting out of bed and being in my exercise tights and standing in an exercise class at 5:30 in the morning, this is a whole new Mel Robbins. And I also know myself well enough to know that there was no way in hell I was going to get myself down to a gym in the hotel and motivate myself at that hour, that I actually needed a class where somebody was going to be yelling at me if I planned on moving and exercising. And so that means that I not only needed to be up at 5:30 in that class, I had to be up at like 5 o'clock in the morning in order to get dressed, leave the hotel, get to a class that was actually happening somewhere in New York City at 5:30 in the morning. And so I knew that if I was going to do that, there were certain triggers that I needed to do. Okay, so I have a problem. I want to exercise. I want to be the kind of person that exercises every day. So how do I make it a habit to do this when I am not that person? I am not the person that wants to get out of bed. My habits say I sleep in. My habits say I'm too tired. My habits say that's way too early. How do I become that person? Well, how you become that person is you use the 3 steps we've been talking about. You need a trigger and you need the reward. The behavior part, that's easy to identify. Get your ass to the gym. What is the trigger? Well, I came up with 2. Trigger number 1 was I would sign up for a class the night before. I would sign up because I was committed to doing this for my mental health and so that I would perform at the highest level in this new job. So that's number 1. I'd sign up ahead of time because then I'd felt a sense of obligation. The second thing that I would do is I would lay out my clothes on the floor, just like, your mom might have done when you were a little kid. I would lay out the clothes the night before so that the second I woke up and I thought, ugh, I would see those clothes, and those clothes were a trigger to get out of bed. Because for me, I'm not the kind of person like my husband. When that alarm goes off at 5 o'clock in the morning, I'm not rolling out of bed and going, I know when I'm done with this, I'm going to feel better, so I'm going to go. No, I complicate things. I'm overwhelmed. I'm dramatic. I don't feel like it. But as I lean over to turn off the alarm alone in my hotel room at 5 o'clock in the morning, and I don't feel like exercising and it's pitch black, there, like a giant middle finger on the floor from the future Mel Robbins, are my exercise clothes laying on the floor. That, my friend, is a trigger. Another cue is that since I have registered for the class, there is a text in my phone from the class reminding me that I registered. Another giant middle finger from the future Mel Robbins. That's the trigger. That's cueing the behavior. Get your ass out of bed, pull those tights on, get your coat on, get your sneakers on, and walk those 10 blocks to that exercise class, woman. Because you are the kind of person that exercises in the morning, even though you don't feel like it. Now, this is where the reward comes in. This is where things get really interesting, and this is where the neuroscience kicks in. So, I've explained a quick trigger, the clothes on the floor and registering the night before. The reward is essential. So, the very first morning that I went to this exercise class, I got there very proud of myself, but knowing I'd be proud of myself, not enough of an award for Mel Robbins, okay? After the exercise class, so now it's 6:30 in the morning, I am walking back to the hotel, and there is a coffee shop. And I walk in, and it's not just any coffee shop. It's one of those like New York City coffee shops, that's like, it looks like an IKEA store. It's very sterile, and it's got basically all white walls and a giant espresso machine that looks like an aircraft carrier. And the person that's making the coffee, clearly from Brooklyn because he has a beard and he's got one of those aprons on that have the leather straps to it. And you just know this is going to be the best damn cup of coffee you've ever had. And then right next to it, oh my God, there was a pile of breakfast burritos. They were about the size of, I'm trying to think about what size this would be. A little bit bigger than a man's wallet. And they were wrapped in foil, and they had been made by somebody who probably doesn't even have a commercial kitchen license because they were made by a woman that drops them off, and they just looked like homemade amazingness, the kind of thing that comes from somebody that they make them with love. They're not making 50,000 burritos, they're making 50, and they're dropping them off right there. So I bought this burrito, and I leave this coffee shop, and I unfold the burrito, and it's dripping down my hand, and I go and I take a bite, and it is one of those burritos that is like that moist, gummy feeling on the flour tortilla because it's been steamed, and the cheese is melted with the chorizo. I can't even say the sausage and the cheese. It was magic in my mouth. Just absolutely fantastic. Okay, that was my reward. I got a cup of coffee and a burrito. Enough with the burrito, Mel. No, actually, the burrito matters. The burrito matters more than anything. Because let me tell you what happened the very next morning. The very next morning, the alarm rings. There are my tights on the floor like a middle finger, and there is the text. Triggers, get out of bed. But you know what my mind immediately thought of? The burrito. The burrito was my milk bone. The burrito fused this new habit in my brain. The reward is everything. I'm telling you, the reward is everything. It's the milk bone of habits. Because what happens in the science with a habit loop is that when you can find a reward that really makes you feel good, that you feel a sense of accomplishment, the way your brain works is that the habit loop forms by associating the trigger, which is the tights on the floor, with the reward. You don't even think about the exercise. Just like my dog doesn't even think about sitting, doesn't even think about running to me when I yell his name and I say, come. He's thinking about the milk bone. And so this is the science that makes it easy. I told you I was going to make this so simple that a dog would understand. And I also told you that I was going to make this so easy that you can apply it immediately, that you would be able to figure out how to create behavior change in your life that is as effortless as making a cup of coffee every single morning. And I'm going to tell you something. It took me about 4 to 5 mornings before that alarm went off, and I didn't look at those tights like it was a middle finger saying, you're going to have to exercise, Mel. It took me 4 or 5 mornings before I looked at those tights, and I was like, oh yeah, it's burrito time, bitches. Let's go. Oh, I got to stop by this stupid exercise class first. But this is such powerful science. And what's also interesting about the neuroscience here is that you know what I was thinking about as I was exercising? I wasn't thinking about the fact that my butt cheeks were shaking or that I hated being there or that I was sweating in inappropriate places and my tights were too light of a color. No, I was thinking about that coffee shop that looked like a Kia, that espresso machine that was the size of a New York City bus, and the gooey, chewy, amazing burrito that I was going to have when I was done exercising. That's what I was thinking about. So whatever new habit you have, whether you just want to drink more water with your meals, or you want to spend more time working on your goals, or you want to feel more organized, you have to take time to think about not only the trigger, but what is a reward that really matters to you. And this is so important because positive reinforcement is what we're talking about. And I'm willing to bet any area of your life where you're trying to make a behavior change stick, you have no reward. Or worse, you're punishing yourself. You're saying, I'm not doing enough. What's wrong with me? Why can't I just sit down and write? Why can't I get my bills paid? Why can't I do this? That's negative reinforcement. And just like with a puppy, this is going to backfire on you. So I want to bring Caroline from Grateful Dogs back to the conversation because I asked her about this. Like, what happens if you don't give a puppy a milk bone? What happens if you do what I often see people doing, whereas they like call a dog to them and then, beat it or yell at it or, scream at it? What happens when you don't do positive reinforcement? Check this out. Can you describe what happens to a dog if they're getting negative reinforcement? They're getting hit, they're getting yelled at, they're getting put in a cage, they're getting just a yank on the leash.
Mm-hmm. So they're getting suppressed. Mm. So I always think of it as, the kids in school where they're like, oh, I know. And then they are either made fun of or they get the wrong answer. They're made to feel badly. Mm. They're no longer offering that, right? Very quickly, we teach kids to just kind of suck it up. And the same thing happens with animals. So animals that have been suppressed in some way, whether, positive punishment or too much management, depending on the animal, right? Because some animals are very resilient and can find other ways of expressing themselves, but often you get what's called learned helplessness, where they just go through not knowing what to do, so they stop doing everything altogether. So, and often you'll also get, it'll morph into something else. So if the dog goes charging to the door and we yell at them, often what you'll get, you're pairing, a negative consequence with someone walking through the door. So suddenly that person coming through the door makes everything unsafe. You're normally a pretty stable person, but when someone comes through the door, you start yelling or, grabbing the dog by the scruff, then we've created an association with that person walking through the door and negative consequences. So you'll actually get more aggression or more fear-based behaviors. And some dogs will just shut down and they're just sort of deadpan. I actually think I don't know what to do, so I won't do anything.
I think you just explained human behavior. No, I'm serious.
Closely related.
Yeah, because we often are trying hard to change. And at the end of trying hard, we beat ourselves up internally because it wasn't enough or we didn't do it right or, blah, 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 which that idea of suppressing the desire to learn or the desire to try, that learned helplessness that we create in ourselves because of the way we talk to ourselves as we're doing our best. Whereas the solution's very obvious. It's rewarding the incremental positive attempts to try, which only makes you want to try more. And I know I hammer this point about you need to be kinder to yourself, but I think that it's also part of habit formation. You're never going to make it a habit to exercise if you're constantly trashing yourself for not doing it or for not doing it enough. That's not a positive reward. Why would you want to journal if at the end of it you're like, well, that was hard? You wouldn't. That's not how your brain works. That's not how training an animal works. That's not how human psychology or neuroscience works. You have to have a positive reward. And so this brings me back to you and what you're thinking about changing and how you're going to apply this simple research to making this new behavior pattern a habit, to have it go from something you're practicing and doing to evidence that you're becoming a person who runs. You're becoming a person who's organized. You're becoming a person who is a writer. You're not just journaling every day. You're a person that's very mindful and that has discipline. And I know you're now thinking, okay, Mel, I think I got it. I got the trigger and the cue. I can't wait for the next episode to go deeper in that. I got the behavior pattern and I got the fact that I got to focus on a reward. How long is this going to take before it's as easy as making a cup of coffee? So we have all been told that it takes 21 days to form a new habit, and it is complete horseshit. Okay. It's not true. And there's an important reason why. You have to understand that habit formation is deeply personal. And it has nothing to do with you. Habit formation has way more to do with the context and surroundings and the resistance that you have to the behavior that you're trying to implement. You and I are not robots. We are human beings. And so, number one, when you miss a day, if you beat yourself up or you get impatient and you start to bail and you feel all this resistance, it's going to take a lot longer. If you've been exercising and schlepping to the gym for 21 days and you're going, why do I still hate this? Why have I been drinking the water for 34 days and I still hate this? This isn't working, Mel. This is... I want to tell you something. There was a study done in the European Journal of Social Psychology, and the study is entitled, How Are Habits Formed? The lead researcher is a professor by the name of Philippa Lally from the University of College of London, and her research shows that it takes between 18 and 254 days to form a habit. And when I say form a habit, that means you do it without resistance. You do it without bitching. You do it without really thinking about it. That's how long it took people in this study to form a habit, which means they removed the resistance to it, and now it just became part of who they do, part of who they are. They take a walk every night after dinner. They always have tea in the morning. They get out of bed when the alarm rings. They take their inbox to 0 every day. That's how long it took. And I want to just give you one other example because context matters. Context matters. If you wanted to get your finances in order, who is going to have an easier time making it a habit to get their finances in order? Someone that is surrounded by people that spend everything that they earn and live beyond their means and go out every night, or someone who has friends that are putting money away, that cook in, that pay their bills, that are interested in the stock market and are learning about it. When you are in an environment that is supporting the change, there's less resistance. When you have a great reward for why you're doing something, there's less resistance. When you are highly motivated to make this change and you're surrounded by supportive people, there's less resistance. When you are having a fun time doing this change, like a great reward, by the way, for exercising is do it with a friend. Because when you wake up in the morning, you won't think about the walk you're taking. You're going to think about the moment you see your friend. When you make it easier, when you make it more fun, when you think about the rewards, when it has deep meaning for you, when you surround yourself or put yourself in an environment where it's supporting the change, you'll be on the 18-day end instead of the 254-day end. That's why there's such a huge variation. And that's really good news because it means that you have the ability to use what you just learned to focus on how am I going to trigger this behavior and make it easier? What is the behavior change that I really want to make because it makes me see myself differently? I want to be a runner. I want to be an organized person. I want to be a happier person. I want to be a musician. I want to be an entrepreneur. All of these things that you want to change, you absolutely have the ability to do it. But that behavior change is going to be dependent on you. It's dependent upon why you want to do it, how you're going to trigger yourself, what environment you're going to put yourself in, and how you're going to reward yourself every single time that you engage in the behavior. The second I stop treating my dog for sitting, you know what's going to happen? He's going to stop listening. That's what's going to happen. And I don't think that makes him a bad dog. You can pick up behavior fast. You absolutely can. Like if we go back to Sarah's question, behavior change and drastic change can happen very quickly because the change in how you see yourself can happen quickly. The resistance to doing it, to achieving the goal, that's going to take some time. And here's one other thing that Dr. Lally discovered that I think is really good news. This is amazing. Missing a day, based on the research, does not materially affect the habit formation process, period. Missing a day does not materially affect the habit formation process. So let's just say that you are trying to make it a habit to get outside and to look at bright light first thing in the morning for 10 minutes, okay? Let's say you miss 3 days. And you're like, that's it. I can't do anything. I always bail on everything I try. I'm a failure. Guess what? Get that stupid notion in your head that you got to do it for 21 days straight. You got to be an Ironman. You got to be a robot. You got to be a Navy SEAL. It's complete bullshit. The 15 days that you've already put in, guess what? It's already started plowing new neural pathways in your mind. You're already 15 days on the path to behavior change. You didn't lose progress. You're not back at zero. You have not impacted the habit formation process. So if you're somebody who has spent a lifetime beating yourself up, starting to change, ending the change, starting the change, ending the change, starting the change, beating yourself up, you're like that kid who doesn't want to raise their hand in class anymore. Or you're like that dog that constantly got screamed at when it did something wrong. You've made it a habit of giving up. And let's start with a question from a listener named Eric.
Hi, Mel. My name's Eric. How do I create habits that'll stick? So once I keep going, I'll stay with it. I want to make it easier.
Eric, I'm so glad you asked. Because you know what? I don't want that new treadmill that you just invested in to become the most expensive coat hanger in your house. And the truth is, there are simple, fun, and easy ways that will help you stick with the new habits that you're trying to create. And look, I want to say something right up front. I'm not exactly the expert in this. I'm applying the same tools that you're going to learn in this episode. I'll tell you a quick story because I'm in the same boat as you. I signed up this year to do this 75-day mental toughness challenge that is requiring me to do a bunch of brand new behaviors every single day. So I am in the habit formation soup with everybody. And I have a confession to make. This is the second attempt that I'm making at completing this 75-day challenge because I failed last time I did it. I signed up last year, and this challenge was so hard, I bailed within a week. So all the stuff I'm about to share with you are the things that I'm using that I've seen other people use so that I don't fail at it this time. And so here's how this episode is going to roll. I'm going to explain the new daily habits that I'm trying to learn and stick with and manage. And as I do that, I want you to think right now about the change that you're trying to make, okay? Because I want this to be relevant to you. That way, it's not only going to be valuable for you to listen to this, but it's going to make the change that you want to make easier. So I'll start first. So I've committed to do this 75-day challenge, and here is what the challenge says I have to do for 75 days. No alcohol. I have to eat a healthy diet, which for me, I've decided I'm going to just eat a normal diet because I'm a healthy eater, but I'm not going to have any gluten or dairy for 75 days. I got to work out twice a day. And one of those workouts has to be outside. I have to drink a gallon of water. I have to take a progress photo every day. And I have to read 10 pages of nonfiction every single day. And the way that this challenge works, and this challenge is really like, bro, it's like, like a bunch of dudes created this thing, very like discipline oriented. Because here's one of the rules. If you miss any one of those things that I just listed, you have to go back to day one, period. That's how the challenge worked. Now, you may be wondering, okay, why the hell are you doing a challenge like this? I'll get to this in a moment. But I want to be very clear about something, everybody, because a lot of times when I share that I'm up to something, everybody's like, oh, I want to do that too. But I want to be clear about something. This challenge I'm doing is called 75 Hard. It's been around for more than a decade. It's something you can find out about online. And the reason why I want to be clear about something is because this challenge has specific rules. And I'm going to do the challenge based on the rules, okay? But the rules of this challenge are at odds with what the science around habits actually says. See, habit research says that if you miss a day, you don't default back to day zero. You don't lose progress by missing a day. And so I want to be very clear up front that you can still be successful in making new habits stick. You can still be successful in seeing a change through if you miss a day or 2 days or a week. And so I want to be clear that the 75 Hard challenge that I'm doing that punishes you for missing a day is not the reality when it comes to neuroscience, biology, and all the research around habits. And I know you're concerned about this because I'm getting a lot of questions about, well, what do I do if I fall off? Like this one from Zoe.
Hi, Mel. It's Zoe. And I am wondering, how do you not let your setbacks keep you from getting back and trying again? Like on New Year's Day, I was resolving not to eat sweets, and literally the first thing I ate was some chocolate birthday cake. And by noon, it was all over. So, thoughts, any suggestions, any tips? Thanks. Happy New Year. Great job, Mel, and all your crew.
Oh, Zoe, we love you. So for Zoe and every one of you listening, we're not robots, we're human beings. And habit research says that screwing up does not impact your progress or your ability to make habits stick. In life, unlike this challenge, 75 Hard that I'm doing, if you miss a day, all you do is miss a day and then move forward. That's it. And research shows the new neural pathways that you create, Zoe, once you start the new habit of trying to remove sugar from your diet, they're still there. And we know this based on research from Dr. Philippa Lally at the University College of London. And there's something else. It's called the what the hell effect. Science says You're not behind. The problem is that in our mindset, we have this quote, what the hell effect. You think, oh, one mistake, I ate the cake, what the hell? I guess I'm screwed, I better not do that. And this comes from Duke researcher Dan Irely. He writes a lot about this. And you know what's really funny, Zoe? Is that even in Dan's writing and research, you want to hear what he's quoting? Quote, I just had one slice of cake when my goal was no sugar. So what the hell? I'll have a couple more. I swear to God. That's the example that he used, Zoe, when he was researching the what the hell effect. And I'm raising this before I teach you the 5 simple systems that you can use to make habits stick, because I want you guys to go into these 5 simple systems knowing that if you screw up one day, you go a couple days, you go a week, you can still get right back on track, okay? I need you to think that failing is not a big deal. You can recover, period. So, Zoe, once you eat that piece of cake, just appreciate how delicious it was. Savor the moment. And then get up, walk around the house, shake it off so that you don't eat another slice. Recognize, oh, here's that what the hell effect. I'm not going to fall for it. And then get right back to your promise. Cut yourself some slack and keep going. That's all you need to do, Zoe. And there's one final thing I want to say to Zoe, though, and any one of you who has made a promise and within 4 hours you broke it. Let's have an honest conversation here. Do you actually want to give up sugar? Do you actually want to exercise every day? Do you really mean it that this is the year that you're going to start that business? And I'm saying that to you as a friend. We just did an episode on the science of goal setting. And I want you to go back and listen for real. If you're somebody who chronically makes these resolutions or goals for yourself, and then within the first day or two, it's out the window. And the reason why I'm asking you to go back and re-listen to the episode we did on the science of goal setting is because if this is like a chronic pattern for you, I suspect that you're not in touch with why you want to stop eating sugar. Because remember in our goal setting episode, in order for a goal to be achieved, it has to have 2 components to it, the will and the way. And the will means that this goal is personally relevant. You want to do it. And so I suspect, Zoe, that if you're already eating cake 4 hours into this thing, you're missing the will. And that's not willpower, by the way. This has to do with intrinsic motivation. The reason why you're quitting so fast is because you're not in touch with why you want to quit sugar. So go back there. If you set goals and you don't have any why, the how, like you're going to fail before you start. And so that now brings me back to why on earth am I doing something called 75 Hard? What is my why? Why am I doing something so challenging? Because identifying that is important. No, it's critical to me not bailing within a week this time. And I want you to think about your why, whether that's eating keto or saving money or finishing the manuscript or becoming more organized or getting back out there and finding, somebody to share life with. Whatever it is, get in touch with your why. And it's important that you do that before I tell you these 5 science-based systems and hacks. And I'll tell you why I decided to do this mental fitness challenge. It's simple. I want to play a really big game in life and have a personal breakthrough. It's really simple. This year, I want to play an even bigger game in life. And I also want to have a breakthrough in personal discipline. It's that simple. That's my why. Plus, a bunch of my family members are doing it this year, and I really wanted to be a part of it. The why is critical. So stop and think, why am I doing this thing? What the goal that I want to have Mel's help sticking with, this habit that I really don't want to bail on. Why is this important? Now, 75 hard for me, I should be calling it 75 brutal. Because the truth is, I have not gone 75 days without having an alcoholic beverage since I started drinking when I was 16 years old. And when I think about cutting out dairy and gluten, which is something I want to do because I get a lot of sinus congestion. And so I'm curious to see if dairy or gluten is the reason. But cutting it out for 75 days? I mean, that's what I eat for breakfast. Hello, cereal. Hello, oatmeal. Hello, coffee with cream and sugar. Hello, sourdough toast with bread. Now I'm starting to wonder, why on earth did I make myself do this? Oh, yeah, that's right. Because I'm tired of having sinus issues and I'm tired of having my gut feel funky. And so here's what I figure. If I can make these 6 things, exercising twice a day, no alcohol, sticking to this diet, reading, water for 75 days, you want to know what? I can fucking do anything. And that leads me to yet another takeaway. If you feel stuck right now, if you feel like you're in a rut, if you just got dumped or fired, or you're going through a divorce, or you put on more weight than you've ever had, or you're just feeling kind of lost in life, you have no clue what you want to do, here's a tip from your friend Mel Robbins. If you don't know what to do in that situation, sign up for something challenging. Train for a marathon. Commit to doing something that feels hard as hell and that pushes you outside of your comfort zone. Something that forces you to add something new to your life, like a training run every single day, or a class where you're going to learn something, or a meditation challenge, or hell, 75 harder. How about this one? If you don't know how to swim and you're an adult, it'd be pretty confronting to go to your local Y and sign up for an adult beginner swim class and learn how to swim, which is a life-saving skill. Or maybe you want to sign up for tango lessons and you've always thought about how fun it would be to dance in competitions. See, what's interesting about a challenge of something scary and hard is it forces you to level up every area of your life, because you won't be successful adding this challenge into your life and completing the goal if you don't change your life and your habits and the systems of your day-to-day life in order to be a person who can achieve this goal. It literally shocks you to your core when you sign up for a challenge. And it reminds you, I'm more powerful than I think. I'm not stuck in this situation or this shitty relationship or this dead-end job. I'm more powerful than I think. And just trying this online challenge or training for this marathon or this, road race or this walking thing or whatever, it's getting me back in touch with me. I want to go to another question that we have. Let's go to question number 4. I bet you've got a great answer for Anne Marie.
Hi Mel, this is Anne-Marie calling from Guildford in the United Kingdom. Absolutely adore listening to your inspirational podcast, thank you. Can you advise people who perhaps have a chronic illness and can't exercise or work full-time how they too can lead a happier and more fulfilled life? Sometimes we feel trapped and just grateful someone will even hire us. It's often a job to make ends meet rather than do something that we love and find fulfilling. How do you stay motivated and hopeful and keep joy in your life? How do you prevent yourself from spiraling and thinking the worst because you're sick so much of the time? Thank you so much and sending all love.
It's very tough. And I faced that last week when, my heart wasn't doing well or whatever was wrong with me. And I thought, it's so much easier to feel. I actually looked outside the window and there was the security guard outside the hospital. And I so much wanted to be him. I wanted his life where he wasn't caring about health. So this question hits home where someone has to think about their health all the time. And I think recognizing that makes it hard. I used to write in books, when I'd sign it, I'd say, happiness is a choice, Sean. I don't do that anymore because I actually still do believe happiness can become a choice eventually, but not in the immediate moment without any practice. And it's okay when it doesn't happen. And that takes way too long for you to write into every book, right? I think that there is a recognition
I have an idea.
Yeah, go ahead.
What if you wrote, happiness is an option?
I like that. Because choice seems to add a burden where I don't want there to be a burden, but a recognition that it's an option. I love that. I think I might use that now. That's great. I think that when we can't do something, we're outlining something that's a deficit. I can't exercise, but we know that most of these habits don't involve exercise. So there are things that we can do. in those moments that can raise levels of happiness. I think the choice is just harder. I think the choice is harder when you're being racially discriminated against, or when you have a health issue, or when your kid is depressed. I think the choice becomes harder within those moments, but still is an option, as you're describing. And where I think we get meaning, even when our own body becomes our prison, is from other people. And I know that because I've done work with, the National MS Society. We did a whole campaign with them where we got, them, the person who is experiencing MS and a caregiver to come together, and they heard about these habits, and then we did it together, and then we videotaped their experience for the next 6 months, as an encouragement for other people, so they weren't just hearing someone who's a happiness research talk about this. They could hear about it translated into the life of someone who's dealing with MS. And what I saw was that, as a researcher, I study people. I just study this not because I'm amazing at happiness and I need to tell everyone about it. I study the people who are able to create happiness even when it would be very difficult for me. Like, if I lost one of my children, I do not know what would happen on the backside of it, regardless of all of this work. I don't know who I would be, but I do know people on the opposite side of trauma and grief who have done incredible things with their life that are incredibly positive. I just met someone who lost his daughter and is the head of a hospital system in the midst of COVID, and was just one of those people that just, you walk away feeling like life is worth living. So I know it's possible. So given that you can see that people are doing that, I think it becomes, to your point, an option again. And then meaning comes from other people. So,
now, when you say meaning comes from other people, I want to be very clear, everybody, because we are also saying you have to stop thinking you'll be happy when you get in the relationship or lose the pounds or you'll finish the PhD or you have your first song playing on the radio. The I'll be happy when, or thinking that some achievement is going to make your life fulfilling. No. And I think most of us have heard that it's about what becomes fulfilling in life is working on this thing, climbing the mountain. So I want to be very clear that Sean is not saying that other people are the source of your happiness. What Sean is saying is that connection, meaningful connection with other people, creates feelings of meaning and joy and happiness in your life, and that serving others and helping other people creates meaning and joy. So this is not trying to counsel you that somebody else holds the key to your happiness. It's another one of those ways to think about happiness differently. Am I saying that correctly, Sean?
Yeah, I think saying it, and it's a very important thing to say. And also that if you're in a relationship with somebody that's harming you, you do not need to be in the relationship with that person, or you need to be able to find safe spaces outside of that. That being the case, we did work with, alongside that, we were working in Flint, Michigan, in the midst of inequality and discrimination and racism, which are real and visceral and pernicious negatives within a society. They could easily, when we came into the community, I was worried people would be like, we will talk about happiness when the jobs come back and when there's not lead in the water.
Yes.
We'll talk about happiness when there's not racism. And we only had money to work with the teachers. So we were trying to raise levels of happiness for the teachers so they'd stay for more than 2 years. And if their story was, I live in the midst of this society that's broken, I can't wait to get out of here, then of course they would want to get out of there. What we found while we were doing this is that only in the classrooms where we were able to raise the levels of happiness for the teachers, students, parents, or guardians' well-being scores started improving dramatically. So we were measuring the community, but we weren't doing anything, we thought, for them. We were only working with the teachers, and yet their well-being scores were improving. The students' test scores in those classrooms were rising, and we weren't working with the students yet. We were finding that if you could change the mindset and behavior of some of the individuals within an ecosystem, you could actually measure the impact of people 2, 3, 4 degrees separate that they never even met. And the reason I highlight that is, one, that makes us feel good about ourselves, but two, it's the reason for taking that next step. If doing this gratitude journal is just about me, it feels empty and vacuous, right? That it's like, it's just about my happiness. This is just like, going to the gym so I could look good, but why am I going to look good if I don't have someone to look good for, right? Like, you could get stuck in all those ideas. What we were finding in the midst of this is that when people were able to raise their levels of happiness, joy, and meaning, it caused other people to see that happiness was an option. But at the same time, that gave them the fuel for why my work is meaningful as a teacher. And we had this one day where they did a random acts of kindness. We took teachers that are doing everything in their power to try and hold this community together. And we had them do one more thing. We had them on one day all come together and do a random act of kindness for the community. So, and we didn't know there was going to be a blizzard that day. So at like 4 a.m, they were giving donuts to road construction crews. They were going out to hospice centers, hospitals. This was their day off, the parent teacher or the teacher in service day. They even went to the DMV to pass out happiness kits that they made until they got kicked out. Cause one of the managers actually said, this is just not part of our culture, which I thought was hilarious. But in the midst of this, you talk to those teachers who give everything all the time about that day, they immediately light up. Their joy, and my mom was a high school English teacher for 30 years. It was very hard to get her to do something for herself. But if she knew that doing something for herself could raise the levels of happiness for other people, it felt meaningful, right? And so what I'm hoping for is not that my happiness exists in somebody else, but like you're describing, that you can't hold, like there was this study that came out about it's better to live a meaningful life than a happy life. Which I thought as soon as you split meaning and happiness, we've already made a mistake.
Yeah, isn't
right?
it the same thing?
Yes, they should be, because it's very difficult to keep, to stay happy when you feel like your life is meaningless. And it's very difficult to keep doing meaningful activities if you don't feel any joy doing that or any return on it. You have to have the two melded together. And I would say grit alongside that as well. And so what we're finding was that meaning was coming from our participation positively in creating a better world that was outside of just the individual. And that when you enhance and expand power out and let people be part of your life as well, that's when we start to see those larger gains in people's levels of happiness.
Oh my gosh, Oak, I almost forgot the most important habit that helps with self-love and self-acceptance, and that's the high five habit. All right, I'm going to explain it. The high five habit, super simple. Don't overthink this. I will do an entire episode about the high five habit, probably in January, because there's so much science to cover and so many stories to tell you. It's also the subject of my New York Times bestselling book called The High Five Habit. But let me just tell you what this habit is, because it is the thing you need to know based on science and research to have a breakthrough in self-acceptance and self-love. Here it is. Tomorrow morning, after you finish brushing your teeth, put the toothbrush down, and now I want you to do the high five habit, and this is how you do it. First, you look in the mirror. For many of you, that's going to be the hardest part. 50% of men and women, based on our research, cannot or will not look themselves in the mirror because they do not like the person they see. That is sad. And so I don't want you to be surprised if simply looking at yourself in the mirror is really difficult. Step 2, you are then going to raise your hand and high five your reflection. I know, it sounds dumb. It sounds stupid. Why would somebody do that? I'll tell you why somebody would do that in a later episode, because the science is so profound. The neuroscience, the research on motivation, the research on mindset, the research on how the dopamine gets it's just unbelievable what happens when you simply high five yourself in the mirror. I just want you to practice it and trust me on this one. Now, let me tell you what's going to happen. When you go to raise your hand, I don't want you to say anything. Nothing. It's just about the action and watching yourself high five yourself. The action alone of high fiving yourself does all the work neurologically, physiologically, chemically, and psychologically. It will take less than 5 days for you to have a breakthrough in self-love if you simply look in the mirror every morning and send yourself into your day by high fiving yourself in the mirror. You may laugh. The reason why you laugh is because your brain releases dopamine. This is really normal. You might burst into tears. That's also very normal, because you may not have looked at yourself for real or been kind to yourself for real in years. Many, many people are super surprised by how emotional they get by simply silently high-fiving themselves every morning in the mirror. If you have this visceral, that's the stupidest thing, I really want you to do it. Because not being willing to simply try something that I'm telling you We've had 164,000 people in 91 countries go through a 5-day challenge with me called the High Five Challenge. I'll tell you about that in a minute. And the results are just irrefutable. This is the fastest way, based on science, to start rewiring your brain and to have a breakthrough in being kind and loving to yourself. And it works at a reprogramming level in your nervous system and in your brain. And it's all in the book. But I just want you to trust me on this. And so the best way to do this is let me coach you and support you, because I have developed a free, that's right, no money, nothing to buy, free 5-day challenge. It's called the High Five Challenge, HIGH, the number 5 challenge, HIGH, the number 5 challenge, highfivechallenge.com. Register for free. If you want a true breakthrough in how you speak to yourself, how you feel about yourself, loving yourself, this is the fastest way to do it, and I would love to coach you. So, High Five Challenge, I'll see you in it. All right, Oakley, thank you for letting me do that. Let's bring it home.
I think one last thing I want to say to the men out there, any man who feels a sense of failure or that they haven't lived up to their own expectations or those outside of them, any man who's been battling with or has battled with addiction or depression or any of these things that drag us down, I strongly encourage you to start with you and to begin with forgiveness. Not always so easy, but without a doubt, I know from my experience, not just me personally, but being in the company of lots of men, that we are all working our ass off to do the right thing. And while we don't always believe that the results live up, it's in the forgiveness and the starting with yourself and the self-acknowledgement.
And I want to go back to what you said in the very beginning, because I know that we're going to get a ton of questions, Chris. Wow. How do I begin that? One step that you could take today is trying this habit of even just looking yourself in the mirror.
I'm shocked that I'm even saying this, given my initial reaction to the high five habit. But I agree. Start right there. Start in the mirror.
Because if you change the story you're telling yourself about the person you see in the mirror, if you change the actions that you take in how you treat the human being in the mirror, if you change what you're thinking when you look in the eyes of the person in the mirror, that is the beginning of forgiving yourself. Like, you will never forgive yourself if you refuse to look yourself in the eyes with compassion and with forgiveness and with understanding. And one of the reasons why I'm going to keep hammering this, everybody, raise your hand and high five the mirror. Because if you're at a place where you are beating the shit out of yourself and you can't stand yourself for whatever reason, whatever you did, we've all done something, you don't have to change your thoughts. The neurobics and the science of simply making the physical gesture of the high five, Chris, and all of the lifetime of positive programming associated with it, it has a chemical, a neurological, a psychological benefit immediately that is grounded in science. And so the physical act does the work for you, and it starts to plow new neural pathways, and it releases dopamine, all of which will help you do the other work that you need to do to walk down the road of forgiving yourself. But if you got to start by simply looking at yourself in the eyes and seeing somebody who is worthy of forgiving, because you are.
Yeah, I can't stress that enough. You could forgive yourself all day long walking down the sidewalk, but that's a futile exercise. The mirror is where it happens, and seeing yourself.
It's one of the reasons why I always sign off the show by telling the person listening that I love you.
I love that about how you sign off. And I know you mean it.
I do mean it, because I just know how many people can't look at themselves in the mirror. Like, it's just so sad. And I know how much self-judgment we all live with, because I've lived with it. I even learned that it's been 15 years today that you really struggled with loving yourself. And it breaks my heart. And it feels good to have somebody tell you that they love you and that you're proud of them. And to some extent, unless you're willing to do the work on yourself, to let love in from yourself, to demonstrate encouragement, support, and love by looking at your eyes in the mirror or high-fiving yourself in the mirror, if you can't do that for yourself, you will never let the love in that is all around you from other people, because you don't believe you're worthy of it, and you're proving it based on your actions. What are you thinking about? Because I can see you getting moved.
Well, I'm always moved by the way that you sign off and tell people I love you. And it ties back to what I was saying earlier, is just my own experience in being in the company of men who don't, they don't feel that. And I guess since a lot of what I've been talking about is directed towards the guys, I would leave you with one last thought. And that is that while you're standing in front of that mirror and you're looking at yourself, you may feel alone, but you are not alone in either the struggle you have with forgiving yourself, or the judgments, or the failures, or whatever that may be. You are not alone.
At a really wild level, there's actually a human being in the mirror who needs you. It's the one person you spend your whole life with. And the moment that you can look them in the eyes and see a human being worth cheering for, you'll realize you aren't alone, because you've got yourself. I want to thank you, Chris, and thank you for speaking directly to men, because, everything that you're saying is universal. And I do think it's important, though, for men and boys and people who identify as male, that you hear a male voice saying these things. It is critical that other men realize that your emotional health, your sense of self-esteem, self-awareness, self-love, and going back to the very beginning of what I said at the beginning of this episode today, is that I think we get self-love wrong, Chris, because we think love is a feeling. But the truth is, you only feel loved because of other people's actions. And when it comes to learning to love yourself, you have to start with the actions. Actions that demonstrate love. And when you are able to stand in front of a mirror and look yourself in the eyes, that's an act of love. When you're able to bring compassion and understanding to the person in the mirror, and you see somebody that's trying, and you see somebody that has regrets, and you see somebody who still has an incredible life to live and is worthy of love, that's an act of love. When you raise your hand and high five yourself and the human being in the mirror, that's an act of love. And so I love what you said, because so many of us know and wish that we felt better about ourselves. We wish we would stop beating the shit out of ourselves. We wish that we weren't in our own way. And all the research also shows that the most important habit that has the biggest impact on our lives is being kind to yourself. It's in the actions, everybody. And so I just love that you shared all that. And I love that you're here. And I love you. Hey, it's Mel. Thank you so much for checking this video out. And if you like this one, I have a feeling you're going to like this one too. I'll see you there.